no matter what community you're from. You could be a college student, a policewoman, a fireman, or even a local business owner. No matter what your occupation is, put all those together and community is us. Welcome to Community is Us. Today I'm your host, Paul Morgan, and I have a very special guest, Carlos Henriguez, the State Representative for the 5th Suffolk District. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now let's get right into it. You have a strong family background. Your mother was the former head of the Boston Housing,
Yep.
and your father was a community leader.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I watched my mother. She's been in housing for as long as I can remember, working for the state, and then she worked in the private properties around Maloney properties when I grew up as a young boy. Was then appointed to the head of the Boston Housing Authority, and since then has become the National Director for the Assistant. Let me see, has a long title. Let me see if I get it right. She always tells me to get it right. The Assistant Secretary for Public and Indian Housing. So basically, she's in charge of public housing for the entire country under President Obama.
Cool.
So she's been a housing professional since I remember, and my father has been very active around education in schools and also community activism and leadership in our community.
Wow. Okay, now what was your motivation to become a state representative? I heard you speak on Leroy.
Yep, Leroy is a young man. So I watched my father as a kid, as a teenager. My father was kind of a neighborhood father. So, he having 3 kids himself, he made sure that we were all well fed and well clothed and taken care of. And then would reach out to other kids in the neighborhood, whether it was through athletics and track or just mentoring. And I saw the effect it would have on them in terms of changing the pathway of their life. So when I became an adult and had those opportunities to do that, whether it was through hiring or working at a community center, I was able to start doing the same because I understood the value of mentoring. Leroy is probably one of the many teens that I have mentored and have a close relationship with. I met him when he was probably about 16 or 17, and I met him because another young man who I had already hired was a friend of his and asked me to look after Leroy because he was worried about his friend getting caught up in the violence of the street that his brothers had gone through. Those stories happen day after day in our neighborhood, and we need to do more of that mentoring. So I keep Leroy as a close motivator. So what we can do if we apply ourselves to it.
How did you get involved with the DSNI?
So that's an organization that's now 27 years old, almost as old as me. When I was about 8 years old when it was being founded, the community that I lived in, the Dudley Street Triangle, was going through disinvestment. So it was kind of white flight to the suburbs, arson for profit, people were torching cars, the crack epidemic. And there were some residents, including my father, that had enough of it, and they started organizing in residents' homes and St. Patrick's Church. I've been part of that probably almost my whole life. I've grown up in that organization.
What role do you play in the Black and Latino caucus?
So I'm one of the newer members, entering my second year of my first term. But it's a caucus made up of, I think there's about 10 of us. Actually 11, 10 on the House side of reps and 1 senator, and so as a membership, we look at our common causes, so that the causes that cross and our commonalities that cross borders. So whether it's happening in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Lawrence, Lowell, Springfield, we look at our commonalities and what bills and laws and policies can affect all of us for positive or negative, and try to seek change through that.
Okay, now you said you had a background in Kinko's and also in youth development. Now,
Right.
How does that help you in the role you're playing today?
Well, what's exciting is I'm a state rep, so I represent the 5th Suffolk District, which is a very diverse community, but it has a very high density of young people in the neighborhood. And I believe that my role as a state representative, that I bring this a little bit different than most, or even my predecessors when I try to improve on them. We've had some great state reps in the 5th Suffolk District, like Marie St. Fleur, Charlotte Goulart Ritchie, Nelson Merced. My goal is to try to connect the generations. So I'm 35 years old, so I'm old enough to know, that I grew up when you had to be home when the street lights came on, but I'm still young enough to listen to some of the same music that our kids are listening to.
So you're an 80s baby?
I am. So I bridge the gap. I'm a bicentennial baby. I was born in '76, so I grew up in that gap where I can bridge the generations, and I think that's critical to our community to be able to pull both together. A lot of times we face these issues, we're doing it in silos, and we're doing it with the older people are worrying about one thing and young people are worrying about another, and we're not connecting on our issues. So that's what I look to bring with my age and experience.
Okay, now do you have anything in place for the quarry?
Well, I think quarry reform, we had some good steps in it before I got to the House. I think there's some more that needs to be done to it. So I'm not in a leading position on it, but I do support some great organizations. The one that's in the district is the Boston Workers Alliance right in Grove Hall. Does amazing work around quarry reform, around helping people navigate their quarry, seal records, look up their quarry, and really doing education around it in the community. So, I don't believe that a leadership always has to lead from the front.
Right.
I believe that you can be supportive and be a good leader. So I'm smart enough to know that when I need to take a step back and let the professionals do it and just support their work.
Okay, now I know you work for City Hall.
Yep.
And the mayor and everything. Did you bring any new ideas to City Hall?
Well, I used to actually work for former councilor Michael Flaherty.
Okay.
So it was interesting. Coming in as a community organizer and working in that building, you got to see how to kind of bridge that gap as well. Where the power lies, what phone calls you need to make. So it was a big difference between living in the neighborhood and picking up the phone and not getting the same results as once you're in the building and you have a relationship with somebody and you know exactly who to call to kind of cut through the red tape a little faster. You would see results come to your neighborhood a lot more frequently and a lot faster. And that is what really became appealing to me about being in a leadership and elected role, is to be able to bring those resources back to the neighborhood in a timely and efficient manner.
Okay, now you're covering Dorchester, Roxbury, the Uppins Corner area.
Yep, I have parts of Dorchester, parts of Roxbury. So I start as low as St. Patrick's, where St. Patrick's Church meets Blue Hill Avenue and Dudley Street.
Okay.
It'll come all the way up here to Grove Hall, to Geneva Ave, all the way down Geneva Ave to Fields Corner, and down Dorchester Ave and come back into Uppins Corner.
Okay, now what are some of your biggest challenges since you've been a state representative?
Oh, there's a few. You hear sports fanatics talk about the speed of the game, going from college to the pros. And that's really one of the things that you have to adjust to, is the speed of the game. The information comes at you so fast that it'll make your head spin. So and there's so many different issues that the state faces. If you don't keep a narrow focus, you could get lost in issues that might not be as germane to your district as your constituents want them to be. Because we're still receiving emails about farm animals in Western Massachusetts now. Those are good causes, but that's not the main issue that's facing Dorchester and Roxbury. But I might get 100 emails about that. So it's really being able to sift through it, making sure your head is focused on what's going on in the neighborhood is one thing. Another thing is really just to do the outreach. You really have to wear out some shoe leather to make sure that the word gets out. We don't all use the internet. We don't all have time to come to community meetings. And I don't want to leave you out because you can't. Some people are working 2 jobs, some people are working 3. So I want to make sure that I have to, I do it during a campaign. The politicians always go out and they ask you for a vote. They'll put something in your mailbox. I want to be able to do that during a non-election year too. So all last summer, we were still dropping off newsletters, sending out emails, you name it, Twitter, Facebook, to try to make sure that people are getting the information out and talking about it in their living rooms, so we can have those conversations.
One of your concentrations are the 3-strike bill.
Yeah, we've been working a lot on that.
Now, is there any way that we could get the legislator to veto that bill or to amend it or something?
Technically,
because it came so fast.
Right. Technically, yes, but realistically, probably not. You probably won't see a veto. So there's a few reasons. It did come through the House fast. So there's some good stories and bad stories about it. So it came through the House fast, and the House approved a version that only looked at the crime. The Senate has a version of the bill that looked at some sentencing reform, which I think is very good. Because of the efforts of the community and the Black and Latino caucus and some of our allies, we've been able to organize and slow the thing down, which was the first step we needed to do. So because there was this public pressure to hear the whole story, get it all out, the Speaker of the House, in his wisdom, pulled back, and said, you know what, the House needs to look at this in its entirety, which speaks to his leadership of really having his ear to his reps and his ear to the ground. So that was a great piece by the Speaker, and it was led by community work. So we slowed it down. The House is now going to hear it, so it allows us to have more conversation. So it allows us to continue to talk in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. We're also taking it out to Lowell, Springfield, and Lawrence in the next couple of weeks. So now it becomes a statewide conversation. The reason why the veto was tough is because it passed in the House, I think, 148 to 12. And in the Senate it passed unanimously. So for the governor to veto it would almost be just ceremonial, because we wouldn't be able to sustain his veto.
But how did it move so fast, though?
Well, I think there was a lot of emotion behind it. So it was the homicide of the police officer that was killed in Woburn.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of, and there was Melissa Gossel, who lost her life years ago tragically. So there were good reasons for people to vote for this bill, but I just think it was an emotional vote that happened without us doing our due diligence to make sure that there wasn't anything bad in this bill. Because,
the way it's set up, it seems like it would affect mainly African American and Latino in the urban community, because there's so many schools. There's, I think something about if you have 2 felonies, the 3rd one, that's it, you can do a life in prison.
The first bill was written too wide, and that's why when it got approved, there was an enumerated list of crimes that would trigger you being a habitual offender. But to be clear, our prison system right now already disproportionately affects blacks and Latinos different than it does our white counterparts.
This is even worse.
So anything we add to it is gonna further that cause. So what we wanted to do was look at this bill and make sure that this bill only targeted the most violent repeat offenders. So that's what the conversation is now. The other part of it is look at the sentencing reform. So when you talk about school zones is an issue where it disproportionately puts the weight on inner city youth versus their suburban counterparts. So if you take a kid right here in Dorchester outside of the Burke, and he's walking home and let's say he possesses an ounce of marijuana, and let's say he's using it for recreational use, and you take a kid in Newton and he has the same bag of marijuana and he's using it for recreational use. Because no matter where this kid in Dorchester is, he's almost always in a school zone, as opposed to Newton, where he's probably only going to be in a school zone when there's 1 or 2 schools in the town. He's going to get a harder sentence because of that, and the crime is the same. So that's why we're trying to look at it. So one of the reforms is to roll back the distance of a school zone, because 1,000 feet almost always puts you in a school zone, whether you're in Boston, whether you're in any major city, but in Boston the most. So we're trying to get that. I think there's recommendations for 500 feet or all down to 100 feet. And the reason why I'm comfortable rolling it back is because the bill is set to protect children from being targeted. There's already laws that if you were to sell drugs to a minor or affect a minor, it's going to have a harsh punishment anyway. So 1,000 feet could be 3 blocks away from the school. You could live there. It has nothing to do. You weren't targeting a minor here at this high school. It has nothing to do with it. So those are some of the reforms. Or also, changing parole for non-violent drug offenders. So again, we have a lot of people who are substance abusers and addicted, and we need to treat them as such. And putting them in jail and closing the door for 3-4 years is not going to rehabilitate them. It's not in their best interest, and it costs us $47,000 a year, rather than that money could be spent on drug rehab or sober beds and things like that. So those are, we can make that jail space available for the violent repeat offenders. So those are the kind of reforms we need to see to make this happen. So I think there are good, my personal opinion is that there's good parts of this bill, the complete bill, and that there's bad parts of the bill. So myself and caucus members want to be able to make it the best bill possible if it's going to go through the House and the Senate.
Now, are there any alternatives you guys are working on to maybe switch this bill around?
We have a letter as a caucus that's going to, a letter of recommendations. We went through line by line, the 11 members of the caucus, and we debated it and we argued it to figure out what the punishments were, what's already in place, and we're submitting that to the Speaker of the House, we're submitting that to the Conference Committee, and we'll be sharing with the community as well what our advice is in terms of making this bill the best bill that it can be.
So what advice do you have for a young person coming up that might want to be a state representative like you?
I would say call me and come intern in the office. I have two college students right now interning in the office. I had 6 last summer. So the best way to do it is to start doing the job before you have it. You kind of have to dress and be in that role before someone gives it to you. Really take stake in your community. I'm trying to change the paradigm shift. I think a couple of years ago we lost the fact that you could be cool and be smart in your community. And for me, I've always took pride in being smart. My parents made sure that they cemented, how important education is. So make sure they're doing well in school. Knowing that school is not the only place you can get an education. You can be educating yourself no matter where you are, whether you're at home in front of the internet, whether you're reading a book, traveling. There's education everywhere around you. And really just care. You have to have a passion for your neighbor and wanting to improve it.
I also hear you have a little bit of game on the court with basketball.
A little bit. I'm getting older. Last week I got my shot blocked a few times. I usually play pickup ball on Wednesday night, so tonight's a basketball night with about 10 or 11 young guys. And I say young, they're not that young, but relative to me, they're young. From the district. So we play about 7 or 8 games till I can't run anymore. So I do the best I can do to try to stay in shape.
Well, I've been saying I'm going to come down, and me and you, we're going to get it in. Okay. We're going to have a one-on-one.
Go easy, though.
We're going to have a one-on-one, and whoever wins buys that person a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Because I know you're fond of
that is my favorite. It's way beyond fun. It's actually, it's an addiction of mine that I've had probably since the 2nd grade. So, yeah, I can play for a sandwich.
Okay, that's what's up. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching. State Representative Carlos Henriguez, and we'll see you next time on Community Is Us. Thank you. See you later.